I'd like to welcome James Peters, who is running for Congress in California. Without further ado, over to you, James.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to the Virginia Progressives for hosting this event and for putting this on and giving me an opportunity to speak to everyone out there in the audience. My name is James Peters. I'm running for California's 14th Congressional District. And if you look that up, you'll see that I'm running against Eric Swalwell. And of course, the immediate big elephant question in the room is, why are you running against Eric Swalwell? And our preceding conversation about the student loan debt crisis is exactly why. In the 2020 primary, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, if you combine their vote totals, won over my district versus the more moderate candidates, Joe Biden and Mayor Bloomberg. So that's the base that I want to tap into in my election, because there are so many issues out there like the student loan debt crisis that I feel that, we talked about the Affordable Care Act and we talked about the difference of that versus Medicare for All, where we have Democrats who are willing to take a step but not willing to go far enough to fix the problem. And I am that candidate who is willing to go far enough to cancel student loans and to transform that whole system into a grant system to invest in America. The student loan crisis is a manufactured artificial crisis. Investing in the human capital of America should be a top priority for the government and not handing out $1 trillion tax cuts to the ultra rich. By expanding the universal public funding of education into all avenues of post-secondary education, that includes college, graduate schools, trade schools, community colleges, and apprenticeships, we are investing in America's most valuable and irreplaceable resource, the American people. Universal post-secondary education is an investment in the future economic success of America. When we saddle multiple generations with student loan debt, it's slowly killing the middle class and working class. It's not the people that have hereditary wealth that they're going to school on that are being hurt by the student loan crisis. It's everyone else that has to borrow tens of thousands of dollars to be able to pay to play. The student loan debt crisis is dealing retirement for the parents of Gen X and millennial students who took out student loans just to go ahead and try to help their child, their student, have a chance to succeed. It's delaying Gen X and millennials from buying houses and starting new businesses. And the high cost and long-term impact of the high loan balances disproportionately impacts the racial wealth gap. We talked about the student loan debt crisis impacting Black women more than any other demographic group. The student loan crisis is impacting the social mobility of all people who cannot pay to play. When you are carrying a loan balance of $50,000 that never seems to go down, that's going to stop you from buying a house, starting a business. It's going to even, make you reconsider if you want to go back to school and get retrained on something. I remember when Obama, during the 2008 crisis, when he came to power, one of his priorities was he wanted to try to focus on retraining workers. And if we can eliminate the student loan debt crisis and turn into a student grant system, we can have that opportunity to retrain 2-3 times through your career to learn a new skill set. We need to fight for the future of our economy, for the future competitiveness of the American economy in a globalized world. And most importantly, we need to invest in the American people first. And that's a big piece of why I'm running for Congress. I want to go ahead and I want to cancel all student loan debt and transform the FAFSA system into a student grant system. That way, anyone who wants to better themselves, learn a new skill, they don't have to consider the cost. And that is 100% in the interest of the American public, of the American government, because we want to have a future workforce that has a diverse set of skills and no one's being held back by the burden of thousands of dollars in debt just so they could learn that new skill to either start that new business. And thank you again for inviting me. If you want to join the Fight for Our Future, my website is jointhefightforourfuture.com. You can access my Act Blue via that same slogan right there, join the fight for our future. And thank you again to the Virginia Progressives for inviting me to come and speak with all of you today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, James. Are you available to answer a few questions?
Yeah, I would be happy to.
Yeah, I have a question. How do you sort of envision this grant system working? Can you talk a little bit about?
Yeah, so the way that I envision this, at least starting out, is we can pass legislation in Congress and, hopefully get President Biden on board to sign it. where we can transform the currently existing FAFSA system that essentially assesses, a student's loan amount that they can take out, and we can transform that into a grant instead of a loan. But I do think that the federal government is going to have to partner with the state governments to figure out a plan to keep universities from super inflating their prices because they know they're going to get free money from the federal government. So there definitely is a conversation there that needs to happen between the federal government and the state governments. But I've also thought about this for a long time too, when Bernie first ran in 2016 and he advocated for a universal college education for everyone. And I've thought about that because from here in California, we have the city colleges, we have the California State University system, we have the University of California system. So just within one state, there's 3 different university layouts. And that's why I think the most effective way to at least start the conversation around universal post-secondary education, again, including more than just college, like trade schools, apprenticeships, is to transform that FAFSA program into a grant program. Because otherwise it becomes very difficult. Like in just one big state, California, 40 million people, we have 3 different university systems. Trying to create a universally funded post-secondary education program becomes very difficult if you have to tailor it to each nuance within each state, versus we have a system in place already. I like to consider myself a pragmatic progressive in that I'm looking at how are we already kind of distributing money into the system to get people to go to school in the first place? And then looking at how do we transform that from a form of punishment in the form of loans into a means to success by turning it into a grant.
I think.
Yeah, thank you for that. I was sort of thinking a little bit about that. I did my PhD at UCLA, and I was there in 2018 when the whole College for All, which didn't ultimately make it onto the ballot initiative, and was sort of thinking about potentially sort of a model like that. One sort of problem with which is good that like for a College for All, but just the borrowing limits for FAFSA oftentimes doesn't actually, or would get awarded especially if it's on sort of a need-based basis, if that's sort of the current sort of way that you're sort of envisioning, will not like cover the full cost of tuition at most schools. And so I was trying to think about like sort of how to sort of reconcile that, if this is like truly like, to what extent with this, like, yeah.
So we would definitely have to expand those FAFSA borrowing limits. I'm very familiar with those borrowing limits as I did 2 master's degrees overseas. Someone had mentioned free college in Germany, for example, and that is true. I did a more specialized program, so a little bit like a private school where, I had to pay a little more to do that. And then I went to school in the United Kingdom. And I did look at doing my PhD, and I realized that there was that ceiling on how much you can borrow from FAFSA, and then realizing that I would probably get pushed over into the private student loan system, it deterred me from pursuing that PhD. And coming back to the message for my campaign, fight for our future, all doors should be open to all American students who want to learn a new skill set, who want to earn that degree, who want to get licensed to be a plumber or a beautician. And that shouldn't be inhibited by cost, because this is the ultimate investment the American government can make, more important than the defense budget. I would argue more important than the hard infrastructure of America. It's the human infrastructure of America. It's the human capital that we need to invest in, because everything else stems and flows from that. I would like to add that, this is a parallel issue. Another piece of my personal platform for my campaign is passing a Workers' Bill of Rights. And within the provision of that Workers' Bill of Rights, I do think we need to address the problem that teachers and professors are radically underpaid in this country. And, when you look at some universities in the South where the employee makes the most money isn't even the chancellor, it's the head football coach. That is a very backwards perspective on education, in my opinion. So in my Workers' Bill of Rights, I do have a provision in there that's going to, I don't have it up in front of me, so I can't tell you exactly the wording I have there, but essentially providing grants to new teachers that vest over 5 years, the same way that sort of equity would vest for a employee joining a company and they get a 4-year equity vest. I believe my initial proposal is a $50,000 grant for K through 12 teachers that they get $10,000 each year that they're teaching added to their salary. And then for university professors, I believe it was $100,000. So that, trying to encourage more people to follow down that path of becoming an educator or an instructor, because we are sorely lacking in incentives to encourage people to want to become teachers in this country. And I believe that we can make a difference with the federal government and create a grant program for teachers as well. And that's a part of my Workers' Bill of Rights, but that's a conversation for a different day since we're focusing on student loans. But talking about teachers is a part of talking about student loans. So